Hi, very good evening to all. I am Taruna Aggarwal, founder of Life by Design based in Singapore. I'm an executive and life coach for women and youth, passionate about gender equality and equal opportunity for all at all levels, home, workplace, and society at large. And I'm honored to be invited by Women Icons Network to have this conversation with Dr. David Smith. David is a strong advocate for men to be involved in furthering the cause of gender equality at the workplace. And David has co-authored two books, Athena Rising, How and Why Men Should Mentor Women, and The Good Guys, How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. A very warm welcome to you, David.
Thank you, Taruna. Thanks for having me today.
Great. I hope you're doing well, and it's the start of the day for you in the US.
Yes, it is. It's a great way to start the day.
Yeah, likewise, David. Right, David, today we're talking about the occasion of International Men's Day. So I'd start with asking you, what is the significance of the International Men's Day for you?
Great, and thanks to the Women's Icon Network as well for having me here today and to have this, I think, important conversation around why it's important in particular for us to have an International Men's Day. Because I think many people might argue that every day is International Men's Day, but I think it's helpful to have a particular day where we can specifically talk about how, as men, how we can be better in terms of being better partners, being better allies and colleagues and peers in the workplace, and we can make again, our workplace better for everyone. And, for me, this is where my work started. Years ago, prior military, and in my career, there was a lot, again, of very obvious inequities in the workplace. And for me, that was just, it got in touch with that sense of injustice I had about how we should all, in our service of the work that we do, we should all have the opportunity to thrive and to excel. The same opportunities and the same resources and the same relationships out there, and that just wasn't the case. And that's what opened my eyes, I think, initially to this, and why it was so important that we begin to engage men in this conversation that has for so long been looked at as a women's issue, right? A diversity issue, and that when it's labeled that way, men often look at it and say that that's not my place, it's not my role to be involved in that. And it is our role, right? And this is a great way for us today to begin to talk about what is that role and what does it look like.
Right, that's wonderful. And that is so true. It is like most of the time the diversity and inclusion has become like it's a women's issue, right? And so much of an effort of time and investment of time, money, and also your effort has gone into making this the agenda, right? But little has changed, right? Over the time, we all know that very little has changed in this area. So what, according to you, are the top barriers to women leadership in organizations?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What would be the top barriers, according to you, to women leadership in organizations?
Yeah, great question. And it's interesting that I think one of the places we have to start this conversation is about how we can begin to have more equity in terms of the home, and thinking about why that's important, because starting in the home in particular, that if we're all in equal allies at home, that allows men and women same equal access when it comes to how they pursue a career. So we often find across the research and the literature out there that women are doing at least twice as much, if not 3 times as much, of the domestic work and the unpaid labor in the house, and that includes the caregiving out there as well. That if they're doing that, then it's hard to pursue and to advance in a career in the same way that men do, right? Men are often unencumbered by these domestic household responsibilities out there. So we have to begin, I think, first starting with how can we be better allies and equalize things at home. And in the same way that we often find that women are supporting men's careers, how about why not men supporting women's careers and being all in equal partners in terms of supporting our partners' careers? And again, we need to start with that in terms of that in the workplace. The other one is that we often find that there's these different penalties for women at work. And part of this is a stigma around caregiving that, again, is often associated with women. And we think about the workplace, and the motherhood penalty plays out in terms of everything from pay to advancement and promotions, opportunities. And it seems like the more children that women have, the more these penalties are played out in a variety of different ways. And that this is, again, a place where men have a role in terms of beginning to think about, how do we equalize that in the workplace? How do we show up as allies and destigmatize caregiving? Because we all have caregiving responsibilities. The question is, how are we talking about it? How are we publicly showing it? Are we visible in terms of doing that? A lot of the men that we interviewed for our recent book, Good Guys, they would talk about how it wasn't okay as men for us to think about slinking out the back door when it was time for us to go do something for our family. There was one of those childcare, maybe it was taking the kids to the doctor or to a responsibility at school or something. No, we needed to actually talk about it, be very visible in public. They talked about leaving loudly in terms of how they approach this in particular. So there are a variety of different ways that we can begin to do that. The other is around the notion of taking parental leave, right? That, again, men are stigmatized against taking that kind of leave, and because it's seen as a women's program or a women's benefit, again. So we have to, again, I think as allies, men in the workplace, we have to take it. We have to take all of it, and then we have to normalize that and talk about why that's important for us as fathers, as parents, to be involved in our children's upbringing and socialization, and having some of that emotional bonding and relationship as they grow. So there's a lot of things that start right around that are affecting, in particular, the inequities and the biases that we see in the workplace.
That's right. That's so true. And there are those biases, and there's also what there's the stereotype bias and all the things that you're talking about. They do have a psychological impact on the women, and that's really real. We hear of, at a very young age, we don't have many women in the STEM. And, we have young girls saying, I'm not good at maths, and, passing remarks of that sort that are going on around that. So to me, it seems that, the allyship that you are talking about in the Good Guys, that would be really, that's the ideal world that we should be in. But the task seems really, all these are so deeply embedded that, where do we start? Where do we start? Is it what level do we start at?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and one that we hear a lot. And so I think there's a few places we can start. So one, I think from an individual responsibility perspective, when we talk about allyship, there's really kind of two parts to this. And as an individual, there's how I can take accountability and responsibility for how I show up in my relationships at work every single day. So how supportive and collaborative am I with my peers and my colleagues? How am I in terms of holding myself accountable for my own behavior, my own language, checking my own biases along the way? And that's kind of the easy part, if you think about it, in terms of how we approach allyship. The hard part is the public part of allyship. And this means that it's not just me holding myself accountable, but thinking about, how do I start looking for, when I hear or see something that is biased in some way or is maybe sexist in some way, how can I begin to call that out? How do I, when it's to see something, say something, do something at that point? Because as an ally, you have to do something about it, and you have to think about, all right, so what is it that I could do? What are the options I could do? What would be most effective in terms of changing behavior or changing? The next step is not just holding others accountable, but holding my organization accountable, holding my team accountable for doing this work, and looking at the everyday, where is there bias in the everyday practices of what we do in the workplace? How do we structure work? How do we schedule work? How do we take time off? How do we schedule meetings? And how do we assign different kinds of work in the office? And these are all things where, again, they affect the value of the kind of work that we do. And so therefore we see it that it's more valuable or less valuable when a particular person is doing it. And so we have to be able to call out these biases and take responsibility for doing that, not just for ourselves, right, but also for others and for our team and for our organization. And I think that's a great place to think about, how can I individually start? The other part of this is thinking more broadly about my organization. What about my senior leadership? Should we start there with focusing on them? And yes, it really is helpful when senior leadership gets behind and really supports and commits to creating equity and what these various initiatives might be in your organization. If
Right.
they can talk about it in a way that shows that they personally connect with it and why it's important to them, and then why it's also connected to the business. Because I think at the end of the day, just because it's important to me as a person, doesn't necessarily mean that my managers or my direct reports are going to find it interesting or valuable for them to be focused on it as well, unless it connects to the business, right? So we need to connect to the business, and then be very transparent about why we're doing that out there. Because again, middle managers, frontline managers have a lot on their plate. Not everything. Sometimes they have to make choices about prioritizing things. And if this is just seen as another add-on or just another diversity or HR initiative out there, I think that this is where, again, middle managers will not prioritize it in a way that we'd like them to. And then finally, of course, there's the grassroots efforts, things like Women's Icon Network out there that's out, again, trying to rally and get interest and develop programs at the grassroots level. And this is really powerful because this is, again, where we can find a lot of change happening every
Yes.
day. And I think that at the end of the day, the answer is it's all the above. It's everything. But again, organizations are limited in resources. And so sometimes have to make choices about where they're going to commit and where they're going to start.
That's right. And I think it's every individual responsibility as well, as you said. So we've got to start young. We've got to start with the
Yes.
boys, the youth who are entering the workplace. So what would be your message for these, for the youth?
That's a great question. So in particular, I think we as men and fathers and partners, we have to begin thinking about that, about how are we socializing our children, the next generation, right, that is going to go out into the workplace, into society. And it's interesting, the research shows us that when fathers are more engaged or more equal partners at home, and they're doing it in a way that's visible to their children see them doing these things. And I'm not talking about just the transactional tasks of maybe taking kids to soccer practice or whatever the case might be, but actually spending time and developing a relationship and bonding with them, that our sons in particular see that. And they see, again, how those gender roles are a little different and they're more inclusive at home. And they take that with them to the workplace. So they have a different expectation about what it means to be a father, what it means to be a parent, a partner, and how do we combine that with work in the workplace. And so they take that back into the workplace, and there's a demand signal then to create change in the more traditional workplaces we find. The other part is around our daughters as well. And the research is really clear that, again, when men and fathers are more engaged as allies at home, that our daughters are more likely to persist in their careers, they're more likely to reach their career aspirations and goals, and they're more likely to go into non-traditional professions and industries out there. And if we're going to create gender balance someday in many of these very historically male-dominated professions, we've got to begin to, again, encourage our daughters to go into those professions more often.
Well, yeah, that's a great message at individual and society level. And every individual, it's a partnership, and everybody must work together to reach where we are aiming at. Yeah, it's not just the organizations or the HR and individuals, right?
Absolutely.
David, in the other book that you have, Athena Rising, you talk about how and why men should be mentoring women. Could you give us a few key pointers for the male mentors who are actually wanting to walk that path?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, one of the things that people often ask us about is why men? Why are we focused on men? Is it because, men need to rescue women or need to support women in that way? Well, no, that's not the point. The point is that we know in the research that women don't receive as much mentoring as men do. And certainly more importantly, they don't receive the same kind of mentoring that men do. And we look at mentoring functions in really kind of two parts of. One is the very traditional career functions, things that are so important advancing in our career. But the other is the psychosocial functions, the affirmation, the emotional support that, again, we find is so important. But women don't get as much of the career function aspect of the advocacy. And again, we tend to focus and separate out sponsorship in particular, how we will pull up and push forward people, very high potential talent out there. Women don't get that as much. Why? Because they tend to be not mentored by men who are more in influential positions, stakeholder positions out there. So we need men to be thinking and looking at, again, people who don't necessarily look like them, to be mentoring that kind of high potential talent as well. I think from a skill set perspective, and trait perspective, I'll just give you a couple examples. But one is that women told us that the most important skill that their male mentors had was their listening skills, and this is in terms of they listened with an intent to learn, that they didn't necessarily have all the answers, that they needed to understand what her goals were, what her dreams were, where she was trying to go, that it may not be the same as what he had experienced. And he may not understand her experiences either. And they didn't listen with an intent necessarily to find a problem or to fix a problem. Again, it was just listening to understand her and what she was trying to achieve and how we could best think about how to map that out for her. And so that listening piece was really critical. And it also, by the way, is one of the aspects about why we know also that great mentoring is reciprocal, in the sense that there's learning and transfer of information back and forth. So it's not just that the mentor is dispensing all of this wisdom and great ideas and advice just one direction. The mentor is learning too. And we had that. Most of the men that we talked to who were mentors of women, they told us how they felt a little guilty at the end of the talking about this mentoring relationship, because they felt like they learned more than she did. And I think that, again, speaks to why, it's so important to have that kind of a very open-minded learning orientation around that. The other thing is they approached it with a lot of humility too, right? That, again, I don't necessarily have all the answers. I'm not a woman. I have not walked a mile in a woman's shoes. So therefore, I'm going to keep my mind open about who she is, what she might want, and not make assumptions about that. And so I think this not making assumptions that, oh, because she's a woman, stereotypically, she must therefore want or need, you fill in the blank, right? And so again, these men were very open-minded about how they approached that mentoring relationship. And again, this was much more successful for them. The last thing I'll leave you with on this one, and I think this is important for men to hear, is that there are great benefits for men when they are mentoring people who don't look like them, including women. Because we find that they get increased access to information that they wouldn't have otherwise had, different parts of the organization. They have more extensive networks, both internal and external to the organization. And we find that they have better interpersonal skills, so better communication, more empathy, higher emotional intelligence. And again, all great things you want in your leaders. And at the end of the day, you don't check that at the door. When you get to go home, you take that home, and it makes you a better partner and a better parent too.
Great. What I'm taking from that is that true mentorship is really a place where it's mutually beneficial. You're open to learning. It's co-creating rather than, the typical form of mentoring as we know it. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So, and David, how do you think, coming back to the International Men's Day, how do you think brands can contribute to spreading the message of gender equality on this day?
It's great. I think that we can have, again, forums like this to have conversations. And this is one of the things that we need. And we need more conversations, more interaction to share and to hear other people's experiences. And then as I think, again, developing awareness about how people experience the workplace differently and what these inequities look like, help us then to, as leaders, then to begin to solve these problems. Because I think one of the challenges we found in terms of allyship is that often men don't see the problem. And if you don't see the problem, you can't fix it, right? So understanding it, and again, we find that most men, again, believe in gender equity and believe in gender equality, just not sure what to do. And so having these kinds of conversations to think about, all right, so what are the things that I can do? Where can I start this conversation? How can I develop more awareness about other people's experiences? How can I get in touch with that motivation and understand how do I take that first step? And when I see something, of being very public and putting myself out there and overcoming some of the social barriers about doing and actually taking some action about this and being very upfront and visible.
Great. Thank you. And David, what would be maybe one message for us that you want to leave us with from the good guys?
Yeah, and I think that our big message to men is that you've got to start with yourself and develop that awareness, get in touch with that motivation about why you want to do the work, and really overcome some of those barriers to really putting yourself out there and publicly doing the work. Because again, you're not doing this necessarily for her, although we're doing this in support of women, but we're doing this for the betterment of our organizations. It helps us as men become better leaders. And again, it helps our society become a better place to work and live.
Great. Thank you so much, David. That was a very, very insightful conversation. There was a lot of learning in it for me, and I'm sure for the audience. And wish you a very happy International Men's Day. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
very,
coming.
thank you, Taruna. It's great to be here with you.